So in this case, the top one, the sustainable site, this project successfully achieved 12 of 14 different performance dimensions. This one successfully achieved 4 of 5 water measures. So the opportunity and the key issue is that this is a new construction example I've given you here. You can dive into the metrics we use for operations and maintenance, or interiors, or homes. Each one, the metrics are tailored to that phase in the life cycle. And in subsequent tools, we'll be exposing more and more of that detail. The carbon index down at the bottom reaches down to those individual credits. And in the case of the carbon index, it is a weighted combination of 25 different measures that reduce greenhouse gas emissions. This project scores 79 out of 100. All right, so I've given the beginnings. I've given that first slide in that sequence that I showed you before. That's nice, but it's not sufficient to actually move that curve. The next thing we need to do is provide some comparison and benchmarking information. How good is the Gaithersburg Old Town Youth Center? And so the first thing we want to do is look across categories. At the bottom, you can see total points. That's one measure. The site, the water, the energy, the materials, the IEQ, the carbon index. Okay, how good is this site? Okay, across all those categories, on average, it's better. Again, that's nice. It's not sufficient. I haven't found my curve yet. All right, now here's starting to be my curve. So if I take that and find a histogram, I use this GIS platform to basically do a histogram of what all the projects in the landscape are achieving. I can see between 0 and the maximum number of points achievable. This is one of the highest performing projects. Keeping in mind to note that my data is limited to the universe of LEED buildings or other certified green buildings or third-party verified green buildings that I have access to. The problem in our industry, as you know, is we have a big black hole for all the other stuff. That's why this process is so important. One thing that we can say is that all of these projects are doing things above and beyond standard practice, which would be represented as that yellow line. Another way to understand it, we can look across multiple criteria. Sustainable site, it's a really good project. It's got a transit accessible, it's got a good site design, water, stormwater, so forth, but there are better ones, and so I can look out there and I can find that better project if I want to know more. Energy and atmosphere, it's a high-performing project on energy. Again, there are a few better, so I can go out and figure out, but again, I'm above average, probably meet my Lake Wobegon test, but I can still find projects that have achieved more. I can do the same thing for materials, or indoor environmental quality, or my carbon index. So carbon index being a synthetic measure. Keeping in mind that we're very excited about the prospect of working with ourselves and others to develop an increasing library of these indices that essentially are synthetic measures of the underlying criteria, where we're weighting them with regard to some particular policy or corporate outcome that we're interested in. All right, this is good. This is getting close. I've got a distribution. I understand how to place a project in that distribution, and I understand that if I certify this next project, I can move that distribution and raise the bar. I'm getting close to the world that I wanted. But I understand that in real estate, all things are local, and I want to establish comps I want to be able to reduce that subset, not for my whole data, but for, say, how do I find the best green building on some criteria within a certain area? And so I've drawn a map right here which selects buildings within a certain radius around that building. And now I'm going to use that as the basis for comps. Actually, I've done it 2 different ways. The first way is straight geography. I can also do it within a 10-minute drive around that building. So I've got a bunch of ways to find those comps. It's all about the comps. And I can say, how does this building stack up? Overall, this is the highest achieving LEED building in that 10-mile radius. So if I'm looking to locate an agency or a corporate headquarters within that area, I can use this information to make that selection and change my portfolio. I can go in and if I care about a specific issue, like what it's achieved with regard to energy, and that encompasses energy efficiency, renewables, commissioning, a whole set of things, I can say this is a good building, but it's not the best in that area. There's ones that have achieved more, and I might be able to go look at those buildings and find out what they're doing, and critically, who did it for them? Who was the engineer? What was the technology? That's where we're going. So I'll linger there for just a second. This is the kind of information. We consider this to be a first-generation dashboard. It is the first generation where we've been able to expose, benchmark, compare. Over the next year, we'll be building out a number of different dashboards that meet the needs of different decision makers, public sector, individual project teams, portfolio owners, even people who are interested in a specific strategy, commissioning, energy efficiency, or so forth. So it's a framework, and we think that there's a lot to be, as we have here, the ability to create a real link between that 1 million square feet a day that comes through our certification process and these kinds of tools for visualizing and informing decisions in an operational way. That's the kind of close coupling between data and decision support that we're looking to build on in this world. And this is a world where, because we're basing it in this instance on GIS technology, we think we can be highly interoperable and share. We can share indices. How do we add these credits up? I want to expose that to you, have you think about it, give it back to me. Maybe you'll make a new index I haven't thought of yet. Okay. We also think there's a fun side to this whole thing, and there's a dimension about thinking how do we take that out into the field. And so I want to show you some screenshots from the mobile version of GBIG. And one of the reasons to show this to you is that although we're limited at this particular instance to four different states in the GBIG web portal, that gbig.org, we actually have all of the data up on a platform in the App Store called GBIG Analyst. You can actually click on any non-confidential lead project in the country and get some information. And so this is a screenshot from the iPad version of GBIG Project Analyst. So it's free download from the App Store, and you can get a sense of all of these projects can be linked directly. There's a subset of functionality here which I'll share with you. So you can drill down. I can click on a building that's right across the street from our headquarters, the American Society of Hematology. Not a place I hang out, but a nice building all the same. And I can click on that, and I can get a scorecard. And this is on my iPad installation. I can get a carbon index, and I can see a simple comparison. The building's on the left, the national average on the right. But I may not actually care about the national average, so I may want to pull down and toggle through to go from, I want to compare that building to the Washington, D.C. average, and I can do that. And again, I find that this is a high-performing building. And so I encourage you guys, if you have an iPhone or an iPad, try this out and try to find that building near you. Keeping in mind that there are a significant number of buildings that are either in process or have some reason that they elected to remain confidential. So there are a significant fraction of buildings that don't appear on this map. So there's a lot of buildings on the map, but not everything in the universe on the map. And as Lane mentioned earlier, there's no homes. At the moment, homes are individually confidential, and so we're working on how to get that into the platform. So to wrap up, I want to just close by pointing you to more information. I would encourage you guys to think about, I would really encourage you to check out the gbig.org platform. And when you're checking it out, don't focus on what it is right now, but focus on how this information delivered in the right way. What is the app that's written on this platform that actually moves the needle with decision makers, that actually yields, that accelerates that market transformation curve? That's what we're trying to do. This is one of our ideas, but we think that this is a thing we want to be open and collaborative about. We want people to take these data and drive that transformation, and we're trying to enter the 90s at least with our framework for being interoperable, open, and in this framework. You can find out more about the underlying work on our research page. You can download the apps I just showed you. There's also a GBIG Explorer app, which has more case study content. And actually, that's one that if you search the App Store, you'll also find, doesn't mention it here, a GBIG Explorer, where if you're interested in individual credits, it's actually, unfortunately, limited to Chicago, but you can actually look at individual energy efficiency strategies, individual credit achievement, individual commissioning strategies for buildings in Chicago, and get a sense of how that might work. And you can also email us for more information. And so I appreciate your attention, and I'm really looking forward to your questions, and I hope this gives you a snapshot. Lane's got a few closing thoughts before we go to the Q&A.
A few kickoff points before we move into the Q&A that I want to tie everything we've talked about together. I mean, what Chris has described is a feedback loop, and